The following Agio-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
What's up, Cheat Codes listeners? It's me, Dr. Z.
And me, Dr. C.
Dr. C, we spend quite a bit of time, on Cheat Codes dealing with individuals who are impacting the sickle cell space in a really tremendous way.
It's been a privilege.
It really has. And I think one of the things that we often don't talk about is doing the work sometimes is tiring.
It's exhausting.
Burnout is real. And, we're grateful that we have advocates in the sickle cell space that work, 24/7, it feels like.
So, some of them, I can't even believe they're only working 24/7.
It feels that way. Look, man, we're going to have a pretty special Cheat Codes here. We're going to bring on some Cheat Codes alumni to have a conversation with our own Janie Davis from Patient Advocacy at Agios. She's going to spend some time talking to Tiana Wolford, Ray Blaylark, and Cass Trimnell.
All-star cast.
I mean, superstars. And, we're gonna dive into topics around how advocates can make sure that they don't suffer from burnout, so that they can keep that work going, so that they can continue to empower communities and patients and caregivers. How does that sound for an episode?
Oh, that's important. I mean, self-care, you can't do good things if, you got to put that mask on yourself first when the plane...
That's a great analogy. Yeah, secure your mask first. I love that. With that, Warriors, Cheat Codes listeners, you've got a special one coming, so stay tuned.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, partners, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in PK activation, Agios is pioneering therapies for rare blood disorders, including PK deficiency, thalassemia, and sickle cell disease. To learn more, visit us at agios.com. That's AGIOS.com. To join the conversation with other patient allies, follow us on Instagram at Ally Voices Rising. That's Ally, ALLY, Voices Rising.
Welcome, Cheat Codes listener. I have the immense honor to be a guest host for Cheat Codes, and I am Janie Davis, the Director of Patient Advocacy at Agios. And I have these amazing guests here today with Tiana Wolford, Cassandra Turnell, and Ray Blaylark. Welcome to Cheat Codes.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So today what we wanted to talk about is really the challenge of being an advocate in the sickle cell space. And Amara and Mike did a great setup in talking about really how important it is to put your mask on first and the challenge of advocating in sickle cell. So one of the things I first wanted to talk with you guys about is how did you get into becoming an advocate for sickle cell? And I'm going to start with Ray.
Well, I got into advocacy around sickle cell by being a caregiver to a son that was born with sickle cell. And, just my curious nature, I tend to ask lots of questions. I tend to question, a lot of the whys. And it just led me down a path to having more dialogue that felt like it was conversation about how do we make things better. And it just kind of went from there. 20 years later, here I am.
So, Cass, being a person living with sickle cell, how did you transition to then becoming an advocate yourself?
I like to think I was born into it. I was the first child screened for sickle cell under the Iowa newborn screening program. And so I guess that set the tone. I had a mom like Ray who is just dove right into it. And I think I was even telling you, Ray, that like there was no hiding behind my diagnosis. Like I if I wanted to keep sickle cell secret, my mom would have already told the cashier or, whoever is listening. And so I kind of stepped into that and at a certain point took that on, and that became my persona. And, after that, it was how do I organize and how do I structure this so that it can be something not just useful for me, but for the community that I serve.
Yes, I think very similar to Kaz. I also feel like I was born into it. My mother, she actually took an interest in sickle cell as early as the 5th grade, like way before she knew she would have a child with it. So, and she was a nurse. So, I went to a predominantly white school from kindergarten to 12th grade, and they were like really unapologetic about the fact that they had never had a student with sickle cell. So, administration would make comments like, oh, it'd just be easier if you had cancer because then we at least could plan around your treatment. But sickle cell's too unpredictable, or like maybe you belong in a public school. So I was thrown into it. I had to like really advocate for myself in that environment. And I do feel like it kind of set the tone. And I grew up going to SCDAA conventions and sitting under incredible people like Wanda Wincherney and Dr. Kim Smith-Whitley, and just have always been surrounded by incredible champions in this space, and just kind of naturally fell into it and really found a passion for it. And in recent years, kind of carved out a niche specifically around sickle cell, reproductive and maternal health. So I know we'll dive into that a little bit more later, but yeah, I think all three of us were really called into this space.
Interesting that you used the word call. So it's a calling. And as you talk about starting off and where you were at, each one of you on your journey, what has been the thing that sort of surprised you about advocacy within sickle cell? As you think about some things, like it's surprising to me to hear someone say to you, Tiana, that we wish it was cancer. It'd be easier to deal with. But then thinking collectively about the work you guys have done, what's been some of the most surprising things that you've encountered?
Wow. The advocacy environment is really very kind of grassroots in nature, right? Because it can start with something as simple as a conversation. It can evolve into, more of quality improvement, or have we considered this or thought about this? But I think what surprised me the most is that, of course, you have environments where, the conversation is not always welcome, but the amount of environments where the conversation is welcome, the number of, light bulbs that you can see going off in people when you have a conversation about the whys or the hows or the story behind the numbers. And, it's the conversations that you are able to have in the midst of the advocacy. It's not all just standing at a Capitol saying, rah, 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 do this, but it really is conversation. It really is roundtable discussions, and it's really an open-mindedness that allows us to understand the challenges that exist in healthcare, but also exist in the families and individuals that are affected.
Yeah. So, Tiana?
I think that what has surprised me the most is the incredible power of the sickle cell community. Like, I recently had the pleasure of attending a workshop with a bunch of different rare disease groups. And it was amazing to me that so many of them, like from CF and these ultra rare diseases, they came up to me, like pulled me aside and said, we in our community are so inspired by the way that you guys have advocated for yourselves and organized yourselves. And I think that sometimes it's really easy to kind of get caught up in your own bubble. And, there's just so many needs and disparities in the community. So it's hard to see the progress sometimes because it's just never ending and there's so much that needs to happen. But to have people outside of this community say that we are the model, and just like the incredible impact that we've had in other spaces that I don't even really think about, to be honest, has really surprised me.
I think what I would add to that is the depth of challenges, of aspects of advocacy. I'm a firm believer of if you fix sickle cell, you fix every drug. Every drug. I to date, I haven't encountered any other disease state that deals with the issues that we deal with, the nuances, all of that. And, you know, Ray, you were talking a little bit about how we have to be the model in a lot of this. And, I think sickle cell can pioneer a lot, but at the same time, to what, you know, um, to what detriment? But fix sickle cell, you fix healthcare, you fix, socioeconomic issues and barriers, you fix, just a lot of stuff. And so that was surprising to me. I think at one point in my advocacy career, I was like, wow, we really are dealing with so much that, like, if you fix it here, then it works everywhere else.
And there's layers to advocacy, right? Mm-hmm. That I think that there are understandings that you come into the longer that you're in advocacy. And there's different ways to advocate. There's different environments and, of course, different audiences. But I think when you start to understand some of the more complex layers of advocacy, and as Cass was alluding to, right, there's so much happening in the sickle cell community to understand the impact that has on other rare diseases and other, chronic disease states, is to really understand how you advocate, how do you partner in advocacy, where do you use a lone voice, and where does the voice of many? And so I think that that's an understanding and a maturity that comes the longer that you are in advocacy, to really understand how to be the most effective and in what layer of the advocacy you're in, and how best to proceed with that to get the changes and the outcomes that are necessary, and to be able to speak broadly to the challenges that we face. Advocacy community advocacy should not get confused with self-advocacy. We should all be self-advocates. We should all be our own voice. When you step into a more community advocacy, now you're speaking, very broadly and across all of the community as a whole. And so how you speak about the community has to be all encompassing and all embracing.
Awesome. And that sort of gets to what we wanted to talk about was, and in thinking about the topic when it came up, was advocacy and self-care. So you just talked about self-advocate. And so, Ray, when you talked about being an advocate for 20 years, and for Cass and Tiana, starting in your childhood, whether you're at the store, whether you're in your school. So you have that advocacy that you've done for yourself. But how do you take care of yourself? Like in this, when you're talking about all of the needs that are from the community and all of the work that you do, how do you make sure that you are not burned out and that you're taking care of you?
Well, full disclosure, the reason that I kind of wanted the three of us to have this conversation is because I know these ladies personally, and I feel like the three of us do not prioritize ourselves. So I'm hoping that this episode will give us the opportunity to just have a really honest conversation and kind of realization that we do need to put ourselves on the list and kind of brainstorm about how we do that.
I would say as a little bit more aged in the group, like fine wine, of course. But I would say that I didn't grow up in an environment where there was even an acknowledgement of a need for self-care, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in an environment, both of my mother, my father, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother were all preachers. Everything was about doing for others. Mm-hmm. Everything was about paying it forward. Everything was about the services that you give. Mm-hmm. And so I never realized that it was a thing, nor did I realize the impact of not recognizing it, right? Mm. And so I think it wasn't really until I started to feel this breakdown of self, this reflection of, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Okay, do I want to do it today? That I started realizing, whoa, burnout, mm-hmm. right? if you experience burnout, it's likely I say it's two things. You're either doing something you're not called to do, or you haven't paused enough to take care of yourself while doing it. And so, no, I'm not good at it, as as T acknowledged, because, people say you can't pour from an empty cup. So we keep going. But the reality is, yes, you can. And we do. And we certainly do not promote that as healthy, but don't believe that you can't. And oftentimes you don't realize that you can actually be pouring from an empty cup until you are bone dry. Mm-hmm. And at that point, just getting back on top and feeling reinvigorated takes that much more work.
Yeah, it's harder to come back up when you've gotten so very low. And then for Cass, for you guys, thinking about managing your sickle cell as well in that. And so what things have you tried to do?
I think acknowledging that it is important is the first step. And like T said, I'll speak for myself. I'm not a model citizen, right, when it comes to that. But I think the first step is acknowledging that this is part of health. This is part of your health care. This is part of how you take care of yourself. And so that in itself was big for me. Now, the next steps are actually executing the self-care. And what does that look like? And that's something I'm still struggling with. Time. There's not enough hours in the day. And so we talked about being very intentional with time, carving time out to make sure that you are resting and to make sure that you are checking in with yourself. Mm-hmm. And, that's something I'm working on, far from being an expert at it. But at least I kind of see a way forward. I know what I'm supposed to do. And so now it's executing that.
Yeah. And, for me, ironically, I'm an advocate. Like I work in advocacy, but I advocate for those who I love and care for. And so self-care. So when you mentioned this topic, Tiana, I was like, well, yes, let me sit and listen and take some notes. But I also think one of the things about self-care is setting boundaries of what you say no to. And so when you guys think about that, given all of the needs that you want to give back to your community and the idea of service to the community, how do you start setting those boundaries? How do you determine what you say no to?
I think that goes back to my earlier statement, and that is, you are going to feel a level of burnout much faster when you are doing things that you are not necessarily called to or don't have the grace for. This is a tough environment, and anything that we advocate for is likely because from a social inequity perspective, we have to be a voice that is not reverberating through society, right? And so there's already a weight that comes with that. But when you are able to better understand what you're called to, I think that's where the boundaries come. As the years progressed, I found that there were things that I kind of directed myself in a way that avoided me putting myself in situations where I'm taking on too much. And so I would rather underpromise and overdeliver, because I went through the season of overpromising and killing myself to deliver. And now, the answer is no, I can't.
Yeah. Well, I can talk a little bit about that. I feel like I have taken some small steps that have had tremendous impact already. So, one of the things that everyone is always talking to me about is just how incredibly accessible I am. And so I could tell you that I am one of those people. I will take a phone call at 3 a.m. from a warrior that's in the hospital, or just whatever. So recently, I started putting my phone on Do Not Disturb at 9 p.m. And I just am not available, after 9 p.m. before 8 a.m. the next morning. And that helps. It's giving me a little bit more time with self and my family in the evening. So that's good. Also, as far as saying no, one of the things I've been trying to do everything. And what I'm realizing is that As far as like reproductive and maternal health from a patient advocacy standpoint, it's really just me. And so, as far as like getting invitations to do ad boards about emergency room care, like that's not for me anymore. So I've come off a lot of ad boards, and that's giving me some more time at home. I'm not traveling as much, so that's I'm on the right track.
I think what's difficult in this situation is there's not a lack of passion within the community. We are all so full of passion that saying yes doesn't even seem like something that could potentially be harmful or detrimental to our health. And so we so eagerly say yes because this is our life. This is a lifestyle. This is what we want to do. We want to help make things better. And so coming to the realization that not one person is going to save the world, right? There's only so much that you can do. And I still want to say yes to everything, right? But, kind of just recognizing and finding, you talked about boundaries and balance and all of that, and being more intentional, like what Tiana said, is this my wheelhouse? Is this my expertise? But I do think we're a community of yes men or yes people where we all just want to say yes because we want that so badly for sickle cell. And we want to push the needle and we want to see change immediately. But it's important to realize that it can all fall on you. And it really does require a collective to come together to push forward.
I love that you said that, Cass, because for me, the more years that I've been in advocacy, the more that I've really looked at it from a village perspective. And so there are times that I'll get an invitation to participate in something or to speak on something. And because I need to say no, because of my own capacity, now what I'll do is I'll say, well, let me give a couple of people a call, because I can reach out to my network and I know where people's strengths are. And so I can feel comfortable in referring these requests or projects or all of the various things that come down the pipeline. I can pick that phone up and say, hey, I know you were looking for an opportunity to do this, that, or the other. And even in the work that I do, we have a speakers bureau so that people who do want to do more speaking, that we have an organized way of being able to help to develop their speaking skills, help to get them in front of people and help them to get more comfortable with using their voice, which is what advocacy is all about. So it's also about training that next generation and giving them room to grow, besides those of us that have been doing it for a while. And that, to me, is my form of self-care, is preparing for the next generation.
Awesome. And you bring up a great point. You talked about your village. So when you think about your village, who helps you take care of you? Holds you accountable for taking care of you?
Well, I'm like literally in my personal village, I'm like the one everybody comes to. And I mean everybody. And I wouldn't say that that's a bad thing, but it is the reality. Mm-hmm. I embrace that, though my mother is the matriarch. That will likely be what I'll step into. But I think that I have no one friend is everything you need. So I do have a village of friends, if that I call on for particular reasons, right? And say, hey, I'm just feeling this way. I was just wondering what you think about this. Or I call Cass and say, hey, I'm thinking about, doing this project. Or, I look for opportunities to build that village that helps to alleviate some of that pressure and helps me to not feel alone. What I don't do what is exhausting to me now is trying to explain to someone. So let me go find people who already understand this. And that makes it a lot easier.
And it's such a good point. No one person can be like, it can handle everything. I'm married and, there's some things I'd rather tell Ray or Tiana than my husband, right? And so being, I guess, strategic in that way and building your tribe, your sickle cell tribe in that way in which, as Ray says, If I want to talk about pain or medication or anything, or just just sickle cell in general, I will come and talk to Tiana, and she'll check me, I'll check her. I'm like, girl, we need to go ahead and schedule that appointment and, be each other's support in that way. And so it doesn't necessarily need to come within family. I always encourage, sickle cell is so isolating in itself that you have to have that type of support. And I know not everybody has a mom or has, that parent that can go to bat for them. And so you create that. You find the doctor that is willing to talk to you after hours. You find the advocate or that person with sickle cell that can hear you out. And it's part of care. It's part of self-care within sickle cell, is finding your tribe and coming together and having people support you in different ways.
Yeah, I think just like they were saying, I think that the ones who hold me the most accountable to take care of myself are in this community. So it is Kaz, it is Ray, it's a lot of people on my team, and even a lot of warriors and caregivers who know me very well. So when I'm like quiet and not saying much, people know that there's something wrong. And that's when I will get like text messages and phone calls like, hey, I think you need to take a break. Now, whether I listen is a whole other thing, but there are a lot of people in this community who are trying, and I'm finally hearing you guys.
Yeah, as a member of the Mama Bear OGs, right? That's one of the things that we do. We know what that looks like. We know we can look at warriors and say, the infamous, you've been drinking water.
I'll never forget. I was on live, guys. I was on Instagram live, and I thought I looked cute, but Ray sent me a text and she's like, feel better. That was happened to me. I was like, how she know? When I need it, and yes. How she know?
It's our spidey sense.
It's like,
yeah. And so I think that it's interesting because the very thing that drains us also refills us.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes this dichotomy that makes it really challenging, because I am refilled doing this work, but I am also drained doing this work. But when I lay my head down at night, I feel like I'm doing my part to make the world a better place. And it's not about me, it's about others. And don't get me wrong, there's many a nights I've quit, but I get right back up in the morning and get back on that horse and saddle up, and I could have just literally walked away the night before, tore up papers and everything. And in the morning, I'm like, well, let me find the tape to put.
We don't tell you. You quit. You do quit.
You do.
I can't tell you the number of resignation letters that NAA
right? In order to stay in drafts. Yeah, they're in when you do quit. And I think that's the message is, people think, oh, you have to keep, there are times you quit and for some reason, like that in itself is like fueling to get back on the horse.
Sometimes I quit for a whole 3-4 days.
That's nothing.
Yeah, right now. Tapping out.
Yeah.
And that has to be okay. I think the work that we do is very daunting. It's very emotional, as well as physical. It comes with its rewards, but it also comes with its costs. And so I think that we have to give ourselves grace to respectfully, bow out here and there, because it's part of our self-care.
Yeah. And I'm just going to have like an incredibly human moment, and it meant something because I actually want us to celebrate this. So, well, this is something that I actually should have said when you asked us first, like, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? So I remember when I started my organization, everyone was kind of saying like, that might be really emotionally taxing for you to do while you're struggling with your own infertility journey, and you should probably put yourself first and then start an organization. But I did not listen. And it really has taken a toll, because even though like SC Red tackles all of reproductive and maternal health, most of my days are spent ensuring that everyone has access to fertility preservation and a safe pregnancy. 2 things that are going to be really challenging for me. So actually in January, I am going out on leave for that very reason. Like, I'm finally taking a step back to freeze my own eggs. So that's one of the things.
Congratulations.
That's something to celebrate.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have to normalize, celebrating our wins in the midst of the work. So I applaud that. I'm so glad to hear that. I was probably one of those people that was like, take a break and do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But that's for all of us. I've had people who have told me the same thing, and sometimes you just need someone else that understands, that gives you permission. As odd as that sounds, sometimes just someone that you highly respect saying, no, take some time off for you, and you feel like I can, and I don't have to feel bad about that, right? And so those are just very real emotions. And so when it comes to self-care is not just because you're able to take a vacation, even though I absolutely support taking vacations, but sometimes it's just pulling away. Sometimes it's a staycation. Sometimes it's turning your ringer off. Sometimes it is saying, I'm not going to be able to make it to that meeting. Now, I'm not talking about irresponsibility or unprofessionalism, but I am saying that in order to continue to give the best of what we have to take care of ourselves. And I'm nowhere where I was 5 or 10 years ago in my self-care journey. I'm much further than I was, but I also have much further to go.
Yeah. So have you guys looked at professional counseling as well?
Absolutely, and everyone should have it.
No, I'm a firm believer of therapy. Yeah, especially with sickle cell. I think if you are someone living with sickle cell, or if you love someone with sickle cell, or if you provide care for someone with sickle cell, therapy for all.
I have a therapist, and I love it. It was something that was very important for me because as a parent to an adult child who makes their own decisions that may or may not agree with me, and processing what I want for my life, what I hope for his life, and just all of the turmoils of life and the ups and downs, I think it's a place to normalize your feelings and to find that safe space. And so for me, it was, some people think about a therapist as diagnosis. For me, it was just about, I just need a safe space to be able to talk. And I don't have to walk away with a long to-do list after. But I absolutely believe in therapy. And I think it's important so that we are not harboring feelings that we have not processed and that can have more harm to our health.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I have been on other platforms talking about this, that I don't have the best history with therapy just because I have not found the right therapist. But that is definitely something that I'm doing in January when I step away. I'll be doing like weekly therapy, and just like Ray said, I think that one of the things is a lot of times the reason that I am not opening up about everything that I'm going through, it's not that I don't have the right support system to do it. It's just that if I know that my friend is going through something, I'm not going to further pile on by saying, well, hey, this is happening for me too. And so just having like a neutral space with somebody, like a therapist, I think is going to be really liberating and therapeutic for me.
I want to make it clear that, getting therapy doesn't always mean having a therapist. I think that there are therapeutic things that you can do. I think that that a support person, if a healthy person can be very therapeutic in your life, a healthy partner, a healthy pet, a healthy pastor or, religious leader, there are many, many, many ways to get quote unquote therapy.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so as you guys think about advocacy and self-care, and Ray, you raised it earlier with regard to next generation. So as we're going to close out, what would be what you would have told your younger self, or what you would tell the next generation? And I'm going to start with you, Cass.
What was the question?
What, as you think about the next generation through advocates, what would you tell them to help them on their journey?
I think there's an African proverb I like to always refer to. Is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's taken me years to learn, because I was that person who wanted to go fast and alone. I still am sometimes. But in reality, if you're going fast and alone, that's where you burn out. That's where you're not really in a good space for self-care. But if you go with a community, that's where you can find spaces for self-care and spaces for, just moving forward in the way that you want to. So
I'm really glad that you asked that, because that was another reason that I wanted to do this episode. Besides just kind of setting a tone for the three of us and other advocates, it was really important because what I've realized is that we do have younger warriors who are looking at us. They're looking up to us. And so it's really important that we kind of teach them. And I hope that they learn from my mistakes. So my thing would be start now, start setting those boundaries now, because if you're waiting until you're 33 like me, it's just so much harder. So that's the one thing that I would say is just start early. Put yourself first early.
I would probably piggyback more so off of what Cass said, because you almost took the words out of my mouth. But what I was going to say is build your network, right? Advocacy is not one that is meant to do alone, but you really have to find this interdependence with an advocacy community, so a community of voices, so that you can have the greatest impact, and make sure that network is diverse and that you are building authentic relationships, because there will always be places that you can't get into that someone from your network can. And that's how you can begin to really address particularly institutional changes and policy changes. Those relationships matter. So build some relationships and walk that road together, as Cass said.
Awesome. Well, I want to tell you all, first of all, thank you for the idea. We're always open. Whenever I think about doing something, it's like, let's ask them, what is it that is on the community's mind and heart? And this topic obviously resonates not only with you, but I'm certain with a lot of the Cheat Code listeners. So to Ray, to Cass, to Tiana, we want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective, and know that you are giving someone else the permission to take care of themselves as they listen to this podcast today. So thank you.
Thank you.